All right, so we've been talking about the George Orwell classic Animal Farm. Uh, Probably most people don't know. Maybe some people know. This has been made into movies several times. Um, the first time, I think it was the first time there was a cartoon in 1954. Let's look at a little bit of the trailer for this version of Animal Farm.
Here is a cartoon with a difference. The first full-length cartoon film to be made in England. Produced by the brilliant team of Hallis and Batchelor, it has been acclaimed by New York and London critics alike.
That might be the wrong one. I'm not sure. Anyway,
that was the 1954. I recognize the animation style.
Right, but there was a one that I thought it was this one in the 50s that the CIA was part of making, and they heavily de-emphasize the human beings in the making of the movie. They kind of stack the deck because part of what Animal Farm is about is that these animals really are, as we talked about, they really were being oppressed at the beginning of the story, right?
Right. It's a movie about a bad solution to a real problem.
Exactly. And so the original sort of jingoistic, I think American inspired version of this movie wanted to kind of tone down the real problem aspect of of Animal Farm.
Well, one thing it wanted to do is, it had a cynical ending, Animal Farm. It has a cynical ending. It has an ending that's very depressing. And George Orwell was the master of depressing endings. I think when we discussed 1984, we said, is there a more hopeless ending in all of literature than
it would be impossible?
Yeah, the entire history will be a boot stomping on a human face till all eternity? No. And Animal Farm has, because Animal Farm in some ways is the practice run for 1984. It was a couple of years before. And if you know 1984, you can see all the Animal Farm paradigms being refined. This memory holes exist in Animal Farm, for example. The constant revision of documents exists. But at the end of Animal Farm, the pigs have become who lead the revolution, or what's happened after it, are indistinguishable from humans. And they have, in a way, triumphed. Because Orwell just loved to leave you feeling like there was no hope.
No hope, exactly, yes.
The CIA's job, however, is to give you the belief that there is hope if you align with the right forces. And so,
just don't let the animals get in charge.
Right, exactly. And so, and by 1954, of course, we knew more about Stalinism than Orwell knew. We knew exactly how some of the things that he was assuming or had heard rumor of had gone down. And so,
right.
So they have the animals defeated. Right.
So yes, they have, exactly. That's what happens in that version of it. But there's a new version that I think it's directed by Andy Serkis.
It doesn't just change the ending.
Yeah, it stars some big heavy hitters. There's Glenn Close is in there, Steve Buscemi. You're going to hear the voice of Seth Rogen as the bigger pig Napoleon here. It's not going to hit theaters apparently until January. It's already been shown in festivals, so there are some reviews out there. But let's just listen to this little piece of dialogue.
Things aren't always what they seem, Lucky, and I'll help you decide what's right. I'm proud of you, kid, of all of us, I'm proud of what we have done.
It is pretty amazing. all of us working together.
Oh, yeah, sure. No, I get it. All animals are equal. Very much so, you know. But, you know, ultimately, pigs kind of got to stick with pigs, you know? And cows got to stick with cows, chickens with chickens. And I guess what I'm saying is, ever since I saved you back in the rebellion, I feel like we have like a special bond, you know? Almost like a father-son thing. Is that crazy?
No,
Do you feel that at all?
I feel the same way. I feel the same way too.
Yeah, please remove yourself from this. We're trying to have a father-son moment. Thank you.
Sure thing, Dad.
No, not Dad. You and I may be a little bit more uncle-y or like a distant cousin. Very distant cousin.
Oh, okay. Of course, Pops.
Nope, not Pops either. Definitely not Pops. Let's not do that.
No, I was using Pops as a generic term of endearment.
Yes, I know. Shut up. You're ruining this whole thing.
Okay, so that trailer.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, that trailer does not capture in its endlessness. I would not make that the trailer for anything. There's so much business and wordiness, but does not capture what seems to be and appears to be, by all reports, the essential innovation of the new Animal Farm.
Yeah. So, first of all, the character that you hear Seth Rogen voicing there is Napoleon. And if you've read the book and know the history of the book, Napoleon is the stand-in for Stalin.
Right.
So cutesy Seth Rogen voice, Napoleon is the murderous, traitorous villain in the story, but remade. So here's the Wikipedia description of the new Animal Farm movie. Loosely following the plot of the novella, it serves as an allegory for consumer excess and corporate corruption in the 21st century, and introduces new characters such as a piglet named Lucky, who serves as an audience surrogate.
Yeah,
so
because
we
need an audience surrogate, because basically what that does for a storyteller is it tells the audience what to think. Like, you're not allowed to interpret this version of Animal Farm on your own. We've got a piglet that will voice your things. But wait, isn't that hypocritical? You know, etc. Now, in some ways, quoting Wikipedia on the revisionist Animal Farm is to, as they say in Hollywood, put a hat on a hat. You know, Wikipedia being known for its own distortions. But we've checked all this. I went into it, at least. I checked the original reviews from Variety and other places. And the story elements do heavily imply, if not prove, that this became a story about consumerism and wretched excess, when in fact it's a story about starvation, not capitalism, but Marxism, not, a Trump-like or, fascist alleged dictator, but, a communist one. They've substituted about every term they can while still having this resemble something called George Orwell's Animal Farm.
Yeah, so you see Steve Buscemi in there, of course, an actor I love. He's in the movie apparently as a character who does appear in the book, named Mr. Whimper, who is sort of the go-between for the animals and human society. He does all the financial deals that are kind of dirty and disturbing in the book. But there's a whole subplot apparently about cheating the animals out of their, quote, magic paper, which is money. Glenn Close.
In the book, the animals sell, or Napoleon, acting on behalf of the animals, sells all their timber to the neighboring farm. But instead of taking a check, he takes currency, and the currency turns out to be forged, which happens just before the second battle. So why they turned currency into magic paper, I don't know. Like, just have it be forged currency. They didn't want to go there. I don't know why. but at the same time, I will say this: the essential revision seems to be this: let's use capitalism instead of Marxism.
It's a big change, I would say.
Yeah, let's create a market-based crisis rather than a lack of there being a market crisis. Let's make Stalin have a little sidekick who's a kid. Like, in other words,
a father figure to the audience.
Let's not have him be Stalin anymore, weirdly. I mean, there was no way to make him less scary than to give him I'm talking to my kid. What? You think Stalin ever said that or anybody like that? Also, apparently there are Cybertruck-like vehicles in here.
Yeah, that's the Glenn Close apparently character. She's got the Cybertruck apparently.
So there's a lot of heraldry that speaks to, Elon Musk or Donald Trump or these other types. They go to the mall. At one point, apparently, they eat all their stores of food in advance. In other words, they really go with the pig metaphor and the, quote, capitalist pig stereotype. And the thing that betrays them is not that they detach themselves from the entire system of trading and reality, but that they're piggy.
Right. They're greedy.
Which isn't what happens in the book at all. What happens in the book is that they make promises that they can't deliver on, and then they start compensating for their inability to create a sustainable farm by bad trades with the outside world, at which point near the end they become indistinguishable sort of members of the board and are no longer, even in theory, leaders of the animals as such.
Yeah. So the amazing thing about this is making this into a metaphor for capitalism. There is a little bit of a role of capitalism in the story, but that's only because in real life
they keep failing at it, though.
Yes, they keep failing at it. Orwell was recounting the move to the new economic policy, which was the early, when they ran out of money, so they started having to resort to selling stuff on the market to stay in power. But the real crisis, and I think the moment that was probably the most characteristically, it was the real decisive plot turn for the real revolution was the Kronstadt rebellion, right? Which was, there's a thing, there's like a little fort near St. Petersburg where a bunch of sailors weren't happy with the way the revolution was going, and they demanded things like freedom of speech, the end to war communism. They wanted to be the votes to be real. They wanted to actually be in charge, have some power over their own elections. And Lenin, but especially Trotsky, had them massacred, right? And this was sort of the prototypical cardinal sin of the revolution, which is that they just whacked the workers who were supposed to be their own clients. Well, that's in this book. There's a long thing in here, and it's redone almost frame by frame when they're running out of money and the pigs steal the eggs from the hens, and then they just brutally punish the hens. There are these awful, terrible commands that anybody who is seen giving food to a hen is going to be punished forever, and all this other stuff. So the book is totally about the cruelty of this Stalinist rebellion or Leninist rebellion, and for them to turn that into a commentary on consumerism, I can't think of anything more fucked up than that. And
then apparently in the movie, of course, the way Hollywood works, there has to be some overarching simplistic threat. And it's that Glenn Close or some humans are building a dam that's going to flood out Animal Farm. Well,
oh God! So now we have, what is that? Climate change?
Well, Lord knows, but if the CIA de-emphasized the humans, sounds like they put them back in big time, and have like in case you didn't think that they were villains enough, they're out to wipe out Animal Farm with the dam. Now there are battles in the regular Animal Farm, but they're kind of interesting battles. The second one, the animals actually really win. They win both battles, in fact.
Yeah, there's the battle of the cow. What is it
called? The cow shed.
The cow shed, yeah.
And then the second battle is one that kills their workhorse, basically.
Boxer,
the boxer is injured in it. But the things that drive the story in Animal Farm, let's just say that it's not purely an allegory of Stalinism, which it is, but what makes it universal? There are two things that the animals don't count on when they take over the farm. Well, three things. Number one, nature. They underestimate the power of nature, which ends up ruining their windmill, which is their hope of getting ahead. This windmill they build, they're going to electrify, they're going to modernize. But their first windmill isn't built well enough. It falls apart. Okay. Then they need escape. There are three things. They underestimate nature. They scapegoat instead of taking accountability. So at a certain point, Napoleon realizes, even after he's driven off Snowball, the rival, who I think is supposed to be Trotsky, right?
Yeah, Snowball's Trotsky.
That anything that goes wrong, they blame on him. People, they have show trials in which animals say, I did something wrong because Snowball came to me in a dream. And Napoleon starts, and Trotsky is the equivalent of Emmanuel Goldstein in 1984. Snowball would sneak back at night. He ruined the windmill.
Right. And that again is 1-to-1 what actually happened, right? Where Trotskyite records were blamed for everything.
Right. Mm-hmm. So they fail to take accountability. They fail to really account for the role of nature, but mostly scarcity is excused and minimized. And the animals at certain points are starving. They're as the leaders get richer and change the rules. For example, in the original constitution of Animal Farm, you're not allowed to sleep in a bed.
Yeah. Number 4, no animal shall sleep in a bed is the original commandment.
Right. Yep. But then when Napoleon is caught sleeping in a bed, it's changed to, and not just changed to, it's said to have always have been this. No animal shall sleep in a bed with sheets.
With sheets. And he gives a long speech. How could you think that we would ever make a rule against beds? The beds are here. Of course we have to use them. And then there's the whole thing about, when they realize they have to milk the cows because the cows are in pain, they got to give milk. They're milked with some difficulty. All the animals look with interest at the bucket of milk and wonder what's to be done with it. The pigs create a distraction. And then later it comes out that the milk has been mixed into their mash. And once again, Napoleon gives a big speech saying, do you think that we like milk? This is just that milk is absolutely necessary to sustain the minds of pigs. We do the intellectual labor around here. It's for you that we're drinking this milk, right?
Right. But so as I understand it, and they have a right to come back to me, or maybe they can edit the movie between now and then too. The starvation is caused by eating too much in the movie, rather than not being able to produce it. In the book, the potatoes rot. They have a famine due to all of their inabilities and deficits coming together with a blow from nature to basically wipe out their ability to do this. And at some point, there's a terrifying page where Orwell writes that it came up in one of their meetings of the animals that they didn't know how they would get parts for any of these windmills they might build or other machines. They didn't know how they'd manufacture them. They really didn't know how they'd do anything. And they just go on. Now, that's the terrifying moment for anybody who's an adult, I think, to go like, there's a realization that our system can't work, but there's also a realization that we're committed to it. So it has to go to the end. That happens in Catch-22 too. At a certain point, you realize that Milo Minderbender Enterprises can't end except by bombing its own people. Animal Farm and Catch-22 are a little similar in that they're both about little segregated worlds that try to be self-sustaining in impossible situations and just become, in the same way that the animals have to revise their constitution and then ultimately strip it down to one commandment.
4 legs good, 2 legs bad.
What happens to the island in Catch-22 is it just becomes Minderbinder madness and is bombed by its own people.
Yep. And the book traces slowly all the degradations of the original revelation.
Promise.
So again, the 3 parallels: Major, the original boar, that's Lenin, the big white boar who has the dream.
Right.
Snowball is Trotsky, who becomes everything bad that happens is blamed on Snowball.
The fall guy, yeah.
The fall guy. And then Napoleon is the cleverest pig who figures out how to take control of everything.
But the tragic figure who's not a villain in this, who's a hero in this story, quietly, is Boxer, the horse. And the workhorse. And when they're building the windmill, for example, they don't know how they're going to break up rocks at some point. And they decide the only way is by bringing them up to the top of the hill and pushing them down so they crash. And the only being capable, they don't have machines yet, of getting those rocks up there is Boxer. And Boxer has only one, as they say, credo: work harder, work harder. I suppose Boxer stands for the proletariat itself.
And there is a real life character upon whom I think he might have been based, Alexei Stakhanov. There was a whole thing in communist mythology. There was a miner who worked this awesome amount of time, and to be a Stakhanovite was to be a kind of hero of endless labor, right? But he represented the fact that
he was a personification of the heroic proletariat. Exactly.
But the book traces, and the book is so close to life. Like they drop hints constantly. Snowball is so much like Trotsky that he even reads the same books by Caesar at the beginning of the Civil War that Trotsky did. But there's a moment where they have the battle in the cowshed, and Boxer kills a boy and is moved to tears, right? But then you have Snowball. No sentimentality, comrade, cried Snowball, from whose wounds the blood was still dripping. War is war. The only good human being is a dead one. I have no wish to take life, not even human life, repeated Boxer, and his eyes were full of tears. So they realize early on, the animals realize early on, that they can't even retain their own inner moral qualities.
And the capitulation, the tragic character-based capitulation in the book is when Boxer goes from having only one credo, which is work harder, to Napoleon is always right.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Because at the point at which Boxer has the moral crisis of a great beast, of of a hardworking, honest beast, and realizes, regretfully, that the leader is lying and that the tasks are impossible, he flips a switch and lies to himself and says he's always right. I can't afford to question that.
Right.
And we know that he's doomed as a moral being. And we also know that he's doomed as a physical specimen, because in the second attack, which I suppose is a version of the German attack on Russia, on the Soviet Union, where technically they win, but they're so exhausted afterwards that, they talk about their great victory, but everything's in ruins. And then Boxer dies from an injury received in that. And if Boxer represents the masses, the Soviet masses or the Russian masses, then perhaps it fits. But what I'm saying in the end is that what this book told you was that it's the covering up of incompetence, scarcity, the use of scapegoating, the use of rewriting history, and so on, all to save a utopian dream which has turned into a nightmare, and leaders who have, despite their revolutionary rhetoric, become almost gangsters.
They've become worse than the farmers in the end.
Yeah, worse than the farmers.
Yeah.
And none of this seems to be very well reflected from what we can tell in this new version. Why do we care? Because revising Orwell is a little different than revising other writers, than revising Shakespeare. Because Orwell was the prophet of ideology-based revision, and his greatest warning was about that very action.
Exactly.
And that he should become subject, irony for dummies, that Orwell should be the subject of Orwellian revision. Yes, we just said that the CIA did some early on, and they did. But this is wholesale. This is at the end of the line. And we found the same with 1984, because when we did 1984, we found at the beginning of the anniversary edition, approved by the estate,
they repudiated the entire idea of the whole thing.
Yeah,
right?
was an essay by a novelist, a young novelist, basically telling us that he was a misanthrope and that the whole book was problematic and that there were maybe still some things that made it worth reading, but watch out. And we also know that there is a new point
it, the Julia.
A new point of view character. And that's what they did here, too. They gave you a point of view character. See, Animal Farm, one of the horrors of Animal Farm, and I will tell you this as a fiction writer, is caused by the fact that we don't have a point of view character. Okay, when you read Animal Farm, you're watching a kind of, it's like watching a hurricane hit on TV. You don't have a surrogate inside the story. So you have full tragic apprehension of a thing without any stake in it. You know what I mean? And that allows you to sort of coldly and horrifically behold the destruction of the farm. When you give somebody a point of view character and you put them into the story and give them a special pair of eyes and a privilege, you're controlling and you're manipulating the response. And I would say that is among all the other revisions, that is the one that ruins the thing, because it's our objective view. It's our child's eye view on a world we don't understand that makes this a horrifying and terrifying book. To personalize our view of it, to guide it, to have it happen from inside, ruins that effect.
Yeah, you just can't do what they did. It's it's an even bigger betrayal of Orwell than the one we talked about before.
Yes.
Like by far. And because this is it's a story about a lot of things. As you mentioned, it's about scarcity. One of the things that I think it's about is it starts off as a utopia for everyone, but when they realize they can't keep up the pace of production, it's not sustainable, but it is sustainable for a few, right? It has to be a hell for everybody else. That's the devil's bargain of the farm, of the animal farm, and it's also unfortunately what happened in Stalinist Russia and the Soviet Union, where they were able to sustain a society. They were even able to defeat the Nazis in the war, but they had to do it on the backs of slaves and political prisoners and people who suffered the worst kind of abuse. Things that that made the czarist successes even pale, right? And they just took all that away. They're gonna take all that away in this new version. It sounds like, and
it's coming out supposedly in January. You said it will kick off our 2026. Maybe it'll come out on January 6th, but it will have reframed, or it will have fully reframed Orwell's dystopian canon. So we need a new word. Orwellian revision practiced on Orwell himself.
Right. Yeah.
It should be called, it's Morwellian.
Morwellian, yeah, Norwellian, yeah. Like there should be like a palindrome or something like that.
Norwellian is actually better, I think. Norwellian. When you Orwellianize Orwell and you come up with what, like a new thing, it's sort of like how can I put it, reclaimed virginity or something.
It'd be funny for me. I grew up in Norwell, Massachusetts, so I actually am a Norwellian, which is funny. Anyway, but we've gotten basically into the heart of the book, and essentially, already the dream is dead, and we've moved into the abject cruelty and betrayal stage. And it's what actually happened. I think it's important for people to remember that. Like this,
yes,
it's not somebody's theoretical interpretation of what would happen in this situation. This is almost exactly like frame by frame what took place after the revolution, with even in terms of the changing motivations of the characters as time went on, right? And as you say, it's horrifying because there's no like respite. Like you can't just go hide in the point of view of a character somewhere. It's just brutal.
Well, in a way, it is the prequel to 1984 in the sense that in 1984 we've got people living in the bombed out, starving, scarce aftermath of a revolution which has been covered up, in which the people can't even get a true account of, right? But in Animal Farm, we see it from the beginning. We see it from the moment that the dream is conceived to the moment it's executed on in revolution, to its betrayal, degradation, and basically perversion. It's involution. It's turned inside out. That this would get turned inside out is crazy, but in keeping with our times. But you're absolutely right. The only way you could write about what at that time, even the Holocaust wasn't truly known in 1945 yet. By the time he finished this book, I don't know if the camps had been liberated.
No. Oh, you mean the German camps? I'm sorry.
The German camps. But we did know of the starvation and the imprisonment and the enslavement that had happened under Stalin. You almost had to write it as an allegory. because you couldn't write about it yet with full information about the reality. You knew, but there was no Solzhenitsyn yet to come out. I guess there was Arthur Kessler, Darkness at Noon, about the show trials, which is coming out.
Right, but that didn't tell you the real story yet.
Right.
Nobody really knew yet. I mean, there are people inside the country who knew, but not really outside, right?
My point is, this was almost the only way to talk about it.
Yeah, and to bring it back to the present, what's fascinating about this is that 1984, as you say, it was like the sequel to Animal Farm, but 1984 isn't just an allegory about communism or Stalinism or Trotskyism. Right. It's really about how power, authoritarianism of any stripe,
totalitarianism,
it eventually collapses into this one thing that is just purely repressive, right?
Right.
And we're in this moment that's, I think, in history that is pretty dark, where we're surrounded by, there are some pretty damning and powerful authoritarian systems out there already, right? Like the Chinese Communist Party, obviously Putin's Russia. In the West is collapsing. It's gradually becoming more rules based, but there is a future one can imagine where it all fuses, right? Because we see people who have admiration for aspects of the Chinese system, right?
Well, when you use the word when someone uses the word globalism to me, that means splitting the difference to me.
Right.
Okay. Yeah. That means splitting the difference. We'll have a little bit of this. We'll have a little bit of that. We'll all bring it down to this level. Now, we thought that a lot of these free speech battles that we're particularly interested in, and these evil campaigns to rid us of disinformation and misinformation, were temporarily at bay. But there was a story this week about a meeting of the sort of grand poobahs, and we won't go into detail.
At Stanford. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that shows that the dream of the mass mind control disinformation regime filtered through governments without regard or with token regard for the First Amendment, such that there aren't differing points of view on essential issues, is still very, very, very much alive.
Yes, absolutely. And that's why, I think both of us were particularly terrified by that vision because it was global and all-encompassing and possible, right? And it's still out. It's not dead, right? So that's what's fascinating. But this book, if you're far enough into it already, you basically reached the point where the dream is dead, and from there it's all downhill, but it's downhill in kind of a fascinating way. So, right. We could probably get to the end by the next time we meet, but I don't know. I'd like to do maybe two more on this. So
I agree. Yeah. It's worth getting through this story, and then I think it's worth looking at its influence and its its limitations, because some would say, oh wow, if it's an allegory for this specific revolution and specific betrayal, what does it have to say to us in general?
Well, and that's kind of a problem with political allegories in general, right? Because it can't really talk about general observations about human nature as much as you would like, right? Or as idiosyncratically as you would like.
And I'll preview what I'm going to say. There is a side in I think leftist circles that still thinks, what if Snowball had won?
Oh, I know. There's a side of Orwell in this book that thinks that.
Right. What if Trotsky had won? What if instead of us becoming fortress, Stalin, we had truly sought to internationalize and, universalize the revolution?
Yeah, and that, again, that drives me nuts because those people don't know the history. They don't know that Trotsky had already committed massacres.
Right, yeah. It was easy to become kind of a ideological, globo revolution guy after you'd already killed all your freaking
right, exactly. Anyway, thanks everybody for hanging out. Thank you, Walter. Sorry to interrupt you in the middle of your toils.
Thank God.
And we will see you next week, folks.
Okay.